Good afternoon and welcome to ICE webinars. Today we are joined by Vangie Dennis, consultant for Perioperative Consulting, and Patti Owens, consultant for AestheticMed Consulting International. Now, both Vangie and Patti have extensive experience in the field of medical safety programs and laser safety, and they both provide valuable consultation services. Today's webinar is a bit of a teaser for a special virtual training course on medical laser safety, which is going to be held on September the 27th and 28th. Again, will be led by Vangie and Patti. So if you'd like more information, please visit medicallasersafety.com for more details. Now, just a reminder to save the date for our 2026 ICE Expo, which will take place at the San Antonio Marriott River Center in San Antonio, Texas. That will be on February the 20th to the 22nd. The Imaging Conference and Expo is the only conference dedicated to imaging directors, radiology administrators, radiologic technologists, and imaging engineers. Now, ICE offers valuable CE credits from the ASRT and ACI, and is a unique community of key decision makers and influential imaging professionals. So for more details about that, please visit attendice.com. Now, please note that today's webinar is unfortunately not eligible for a CE credit. We will wrap up today's presentation with a live Q&A, so please feel free to submit your questions anytime using the questions feature on your dashboard. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Vangie and Patti are our presenters today, and they will be discussing laser safety in medical imaging, the importance of a medical laser safety officer. So Vangie and Patti, you may begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much, Linda. I like to think laser safety professionals are medical practitioners, compliance officers. Are you ready for the challenging of the status quo? Because Patti and I are so passionate about individuals and facilities understanding the regulations that an LSO is required. And we're hopefully going to uncover just some review of what to expect with the course coming up in September of laser safety compliance, standards concerning lasers, whether they're leased, let me emphasize that, rented or owned. Radiation and laser safety obligations are so critical in healthcare, manufacturing, research, and our educational settings. So the objectives for today's webinar, we're going to understand the unique guidelines, the standards and the procedures required for the safe use of lasers in practice. And we're going to define specifically the roles and responsibilities of those of you that may think about or are already laser safety officers. So my background, I'm a consultant for Perioperative Consulting, LLC. I've been a nurse, don't hold me to it, for almost 50 years, over 45 years experience. I sit on the board of commission for the Board of Laser Safety, past nominating committee advisor, but my positions over the last 12 years have been with National Association of Perioperative Nurses. I help be the expert reviewer for the guidelines, and guidelines are evidence-based practice with AestheticMed that involves not just nurses, it involves physicians and biomedical engineers and radiation safety officers. It is a consortium of different individuals, and it's all based on evidence. I just received FAORN, which is the fellowship for Association of Perioperative Nurses, and I just now, which I can't use it until the induction, am a fellow in the Academy of Nursing. Now, my buddy, or my partner in crime, Patti and I have known each other for almost 40 years, 35 years. We've taught together. We have been on all the organizations from the ANSI standards. She was also an expert reviewer with me for the guidelines, again, for FAORN, which is evidence-based practice. But she's an expert in medical laser safety with extensive experience. She has held multiple roles as myself, the chair. Patti was the chair of the American Society for Lasers in Medicine and Surgery. She has actually was the secretariat for the ANSI standards, ANSI 136.3. She has been a principal instructor for Rockwell Laser Industries and served on many committees such as IEC, where And just recently, and very proud of her, at the International Laser Safety Conference, she received the James Rockwell Jr. Education Achievement Award for her contributions. And I am honored to present with Patti today. So you need a laser safety officer. Let's take a deeper dive. And what we're going to do is talk about what the roles of an LSO are, specifically a medical LSO that is not necessarily limited to a physician or a nurse. And so many people think that role is held by those individuals, and that's not necessarily so. So who can be a laser safety officer? It is an administrative role, and it has to have authority. I always say in my laser safety officer courses, if you don't have the authority and the title, it is no good than the piece of paper that it's written on. You have to have the authority to carry through safety. So a medical laser safety officer is a specially trained individual, and their role is to ensure the safe use of lasers in the medical environments, hospitals, surgery centers, dermatological clinics, and this role is defined and guided by ANSI 136.3 or the American National Standard for Safe Use of Lasers in Healthcare. So who can be a medical laser safety officer? I think that's important to define because, again, we have these urban legends that they only can be people that are involved in actually the clinical aspects of it. Now, does it help to know the clinical? Absolutely. But this role is an administrative role. They can be clinical or have a technical background in healthcare, biomedical engineering, operating room management, or laser technology. They can be a registered nurse, a medical physician, medical director, surgeon, a doctor of osteopathic medicine, a certified surgical technologist, a biomedical engineer, or someone with specialized training in laser safety. What is important, and Patti will emphasize it at the end, they must complete a laser safety officer training course. And these are offered by many accredited providers, but I think the key is should be a BLS approved, Board of Laser Safety approved course, and those that teach you should be certified medical laser safety officers. So they may be designated by the facility or employer after proper training and your demonstration of competency. So what are the safety obligations of an LSO? Well, you have to have an LSO oversight. You need, and Patti will drill down, proper eye and skin protection, standard operating procedures, controlled access and signage. And this is just brief. These are 4 or 5 bullets here, but it's so much bigger than that, as well as the documentation and the reporting. And the expectations and responsibilities include the development and enforcement of safety protocols, laser equipment evaluation. You don't know how many times I have heard LSOs say to me, well, you know, the laser just arrived on the docket and I didn't even know, and we're scuffling trying to find the wavelength and the delivery system and what is the competencies of everything. They have to be included in any kind of equipment evaluation. That's imperative to the introduction. And a lot of this should be part of what we call a laser program policy. It's an administrative policy. This is not a departmental policy. They are a part of training and education and hazard control and investigation of audits and as well as incidents or variance reporting. Because so many times variance reporting go to the quality department and they don't include the LSO when there may be standard operating procedures that need to be redefined or developed to keep it from happening again. And they're very much a part of the record keeping and the documentation. So, number 1, establish a safety program oversight. What does the program do? It identifies your system and how lasers are brought in and what is expected, whether it's the credentialing of the doctors or the credentialing of the staff, and how you're going to have either a LSO, laser safety officer, or deputy, or your LSS or laser safety contact. Now, a contact is more of a resource over the service line, very similar to your deputy, and the laser safety specialist is your safety prime in the perioperative or clinical services or procedure rooms or interventional radiology. I had interventional radiology for close to 5 years, and we had all types of lasers coming in for various procedures. Now, who establishes these or helps to direct and establish your program policy or program oversight? Guidelines from Association of Perioperative Practices. And perioperative is not just the operating room. It is a global, international organization. They're evidence-based guidelines, and I would highly recommend that, whether you're a biomed or a radiation safety officer or an industrial physicist. And those that are from Canada, their guidelines are associated with ORNAC, that is ARN's equivalent. And then you've got the American National Standards Institute, as well as the CSA group, which the recent guidelines from the Canadian Safety Association came out. And I think it was finalized or released. And Patti, you don't quote me on it, in December 2024. So FDA also regulates a lot of what happens with the manufacturers as lasers are introduced. So a laser safety program oversight is for all classifications. When I worked Emory Health System, yes, I was the laser safety officer over the Emory clinics, which the hospital and the clinics were very different, but yet associated with the university system. So the university had its own lasers where they were doing research and they were moving lasers all over the place. And what was come in as a class 2 would end up being a class 4 if the skin or the outer covering of the laser was removed, because they were doing so much research and they were using specific kind of animal models, and you had to treat them like people too. So there was a misunderstanding with Emory University Health System that it was different than what a hospital or procedural or clinic or an ambulatory center is, when in actuality it's the same. It's to ensure all lasers used in a facility are properly classified and documented. It is a program oversight. So hazard evaluation, how often should we do it? I think that's a question Patti and I get all the time. Hazard evaluation, number one, should be done prior to using the laser on a patient or in a procedural room. Assessment, a standard operating procedure needs to be put in place. And that may be different per wavelength and services that and delivery systems that are used on a specific situation or patient. Like, for example, airway protocol. Hazard evaluation is very different for airway protocol than what may it be for urology, because you've got endotracheal tubes that have to be specialized. You have anesthesia gas mixtures, which could be highly flammable, very different than when you're working in a lower tract environment using a different kind of laser and a very different type of delivery system. So that is a type of hazard evaluation. But hazard evaluation goes beyond that, where you may have the impact of the entire laser safety program, which Patti will get into, and that's the audit section of it. And one of the questions we get is, how often do you do an audit? Well, it really depends on the size of your program and how the mix of your program is, but minimum once a year, but she'll talk more about it. But the purpose of hazard evaluation is to assess the environment and look at exposures that can occur, and use that critical thinking skill by using your guidelines from AORN and your standards, guidelines versus standards from ANSI or from CSA, which are consensus groups. It's expert opinion. So the combination of the two help you make a good assessment of what needs to be done, because you'd like to think we're all Netter's cookbook recipes and we just come in and everybody's going to be treated the same way. But we have, unlike industry, we have people on that table and we have staff around the room, and we have to consider the whole gamut of how that's going to impact us. Control measures. Control measures, what does that mean? So some great pictures Patti shared with this presentation, and you have color dependent lasers, and you have to consider, can the beam go through that window? And then there has been so much controversy on warning signs. Warning signs have changed in the ANSI 136.3 recently. And then protective eyewear. Everybody's trying to save money by having one size fits all again, and a set of eyewear that covers multiple wavelengths. I'm here to tell you, nobody's saying you can't, but that gets you in trouble. But room suite or in your treatment areas, what kind of signage do you have? Or what are you doing to alert people that are coming in? And a lot of individuals don't understand that needs to be every access into that area. And there needs to be appropriate sign with appropriate eyewear. And here's a kicker here. Anybody that has access to it must have some form of laser training. You have to ensure interlocks and key controls function properly, and that's foot pedal control. And the interlocks, there's interlocks on every single laser that you purchase on the back, and make sure all those control systems are functioning properly. Let's see if I can get this to move. Thank you. Policy and procedure development. Policies and procedures are written according to the practice situation. I'm not going to write a policy on urology lasers when I don't have a urology laser in my service line. So policies and procedures are written in regard to the practice setting. There are two things you look at. You look at departmental policies that define what you do in every service area, whether it's airway or urology, depends on what service lines that you have there. And then there's standard operating procedures for the lasers in use. They have to be put in place. Take the key, you turn it on, you flip the circuit, or excuse me, I'm going backwards here. You get the key, flip the circuit breaker to the off position before you plug it in. Flip the circuit breaker back on. Step 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are standard operating procedures, even to the point of addressing, do you test fire if you don't have beam technology, beam gap technology for your CO2s, or you have to put in SOPs for test firing. So they're specific to the service lines and the lasers that you have. They even go into detail with procedures or SOPs for alignment. How do you shut the laser off? And what do you do when an incident occurs? So training and education, this was a 3.5-day course that I did, and we'd have a small group, and these were health physicists, radiation safety officers, and biomedical engineers, and what was so great about this course is we got to get a clean slate and bring these individuals in and teach them the clinical that matches with the engineering controls that go on that so many times that your imaging and your biomed is pretty intuitive with. So this ensures that staff are knowledgeable about laser classifications, the risk, and the proper use of personal protective equipment. The extent of the training is so big depending on the type of audience you have. So I'm going to kind of put in a plug there. The course coming up is so unique and different than so many of the MLSO courses out there. Medical Laser Safety Officer, again, approved by the BLS. And then Patti and I thinking, what are the needs of the individuals that come to this course? What do we do for them to get them up and running to become medical laser safety officers? So audits, conduct regular audits. How often are audits? A minimum of once a year is what the consensus standard says, which is ANSI, as well as CSS. But the ARN standards also say yearly or more often, as both the consensus groups say, as needed by the size of your program. So the inspections of the system and their environments, why is it so imperative? Let me give you a story about my engineer. I always took my engineer. I was the LSO for Gwinnett Hospital System. And I said, Bill, come on, it's time to do an audit. And as we're going through the system, here's this laser that shouldn't even be on our inventory. And Bill goes, yeah, I don't have this. And I go, well, what's going on here? And I asked the manager, the director, and she says, oh, we've been using that for planners warts and blah, blah, blah. Never registered, no PMs, preventative maintenance done on them. But this is what the audit picked up. Or the audit may pick up the inspection of the eyewear. We may see where we have scratched or damaged eyewear that is not going to protect you from laser exposure. Those are examples of audits. And what really helps too is the tracking of your incidents or your variance report to see if you've got to change some of your practices. So national compliance, everybody is asking the $100,000 question. Do you have to have an LSO? Is an LSO regulated? Absolutely, it is regulated. And those compliance and regulations come from OSHA, every state, FDA, CMS is the government, but CMS also regulates your reimbursement. If we're not compliant to any kind of practice or standard, it will definitely affect your reimbursement for your hospitals or your clinics or your service areas. So it could be all these authorities. So accreditation compliance, that is to ensure compliance with the standards. And who are these compliance? And we're just skimming the top. They are the Joint Commission. And there is some things that we want to do to let Joint Commission or help them understand what's going on with laser programs across the country. The new accreditation, which is very similar to Joint Commission, is new to the United States, but relatively not new international, is DNV. Don't ask me to pronounce the real name of DNV. And then there is the Accreditation Association for Ambulatory Healthcare, which is AAA and Quad A. So I have talked enough. I want to turn this over to my colleague and friend, Patti Owens.
Thank you, Vangie. We have discussed the fact, Vangie and I, that we have been soulmates and sisters for such a long time that we basically, know what each other is thinking all the time. And it's just, she's been my mentor, my colleague, my friend, and it's been just so fun to be able to join together and really come up with this 2-day comprehensive class that we're looking at giving in September. So with that, I'm going to continue the role of the laser safety officer. And, we have to discuss the fact that if you're looking at what documents do you have in front of you that you're going to be looking at designing your policies and procedures and setting up your laser program, Vangie did talk about the ANSI Z136.3 2024. If you don't have that in your area, then you want to get access to that. And if you looked at section 1.3, it does give you a complete job description of what the MLSO is. If you are fortunate enough to work also with the OR and have access to the ARN guidelines, Vangie and I were the subject matter experts on that, helped write those guidelines, and that's in section 12 and describes the role of the medical laser safety officer. And so with that, going forward, another really important role that you want to write up in your job description of an MLSO, or if you're planning on becoming one, you want to make sure that this is included, is incident investigation. And if you look at the ARN guidelines, if you have access, you're going to be looking at section 19 and also the ANSI document, Z136.3. You're going to be looking at dealing with section 6. Now, the ANSI document is for medical facilities, and it uses the same verbiage as a horizontal document, which is the .1, and they kind of harmonize with each other. So the important part to remember is that this language is universal of what you need to do if there's a suspected or an actual injury. And we have a huge section in our lecture on ocular injuries, what type of injuries could happen with a class 3B or class 4 laser. And this is a really important to know in that, your ocular injuries are your #1 high risk type of incident that could happen. And so when you're moving forward, if you do think you have a suspected injury or an actual injury, you want to follow up your set and designated and passed and approved policy and procedures. So make sure you have procedures discussing how you go forward if there is a suspected injury. Looking at the ANSI document, it says that you need to have a medical exam within 48 hours of this incident, okay? Another important thing is to remember is what type of wavelength are you using, okay? Some of the wavelengths, like the excimer lasers that you're dealing with in your IR area, can actually cause corneal damage or possibly even a premature cataract. Okay, so this is very important to understand. your wavelength that you have, okay? And that will determine the extent or possible extent of an injury. We do know that some of our lasers that have longer wavelengths than, let's say, excimer, maybe take a longer time to appear, they may take 24, 48, 72 hours. So it's important to have a program in place that's going to look at long-term medical surveillance. That is very important. And then the wavelengths that are in the range of 400 nanometers, which is the beginning of your visible light, to 700 nanometers, the end of your visible light, and infrared, even out to 1400 nanometers. These are lasers that you really have to be worried about because you could have a possible retinal damage with this to the macula or even to the fundal area, which is your central vision. So once again, medical surveillance is really important. So policies and procedures are really important. Also making sure that you have a medical surveillance tool for documentation. We'll present that at our workshop in February, but you can then track the initial incident, what happened. Let's say you need to send them to an ophthalmologist, because if you do have a retinal damaging incident that happens with the 400 to 1400 nanometer wavelengths, you need to send them to an ophthalmologist. So you want to have this full fundal eye exam that should be on your medical surveillance. Also, you want to make sure that in this follow-up, you also have this variance or incident reporting that will go to your laser committee or maybe your risk management committee, safety committee, whatever sort of institutional committees that you have in place to monitor the safety within your organization. Also, if you have an incident that occurs and it's the result of a laser malfunction, which can happen, then this is regulatory, because you got to pull that device or you have to tag it. And this is under the OSHA lockout tagout regulation. And it cannot be returned to use until it meets the manufacturer's specification. The other thing is that if it is as a result of an actual malfunction of that laser device, you have to contact the manufacturer also, and you may need to file a medical device report to the FDA, which is also regulatory. So this is a huge area of the role of the MLSO. It's important to have your policies and procedures and your medical surveillance documents in place. Make sure you have an ophthalmologist set up, especially if you are working with those retinal damaging lasers. The next important area is laser inventory and documentation. So as Vangie talked about classification of lasers, you know, you're going to be working with the most hazardous lasers, these class 4 lasers in radiology. I mean, these are lasers that can cause injury to the eye from a direct, reflected, or scattered radiation, okay? Or an accidental beam, and even a diffuse and backscatter with some of the other wavelengths. And so this is regulatory because CMS requires that you have an inventory of all the high-risk, acute, critical pieces of medical devices, okay? And usually Biomed handles this inventory, but you want to make sure it's for any sort of owned, leased, or rented devices. And this inventory, these high-risk critical devices, needs to be highlighted or earmarked or designated so that you know that these are the ones that could cause injury if there's a malfunction to that equipment, or even death. That's the definition of a critical medical device. So this inventory needs to be in place. There's a lot of data that needs to be on your inventory that we'll talk about in September. But one of it, of course, is information about the actual device, the manufacturer, the maximum output, classification, all of that should be in place in your biomedical department. And so also, it's very important, which is also regulatory by CMS, is you need to follow the manufacturer's designated schedule for PMs, preventive maintenance, and servicing. That means you need to have the user guide for all of your lasers. If you don't have it, you need to find it, because in that user guide, this is required by the FDA and CDRH, it will tell you the schedule of the maintenance and preventive servicing that needs to happen. And that needs to be recorded and that needs to be on file. And furthermore, what's also regulatory is CMS requires that any technician, whether it's in-house, out of house, third party, from the manufacturer, they also need to show documentation that they are trained, and you need to have access to that and kept in your records. You are the ultimate communicator, or if you're not the MLSO, you're going to be communicating to the MLSO, because the MLSO holds the key. They are the communicator with the laser team, the laser operator, the laser user, the laser safety committee, the risk management committee, the supervisors, the managers, and the perioperative educators, okay? They're the ones that know if there's a piece of equipment, and of course, biomed, and all the departments like IR that would be using these lasers, okay? And they should know that if there's an equipment malfunction, or maybe there's a recall, or something else is happening, or are there new regulatory, sort of mandates that have come out that now you need to follow. So this is also an important role. You are the safety consultant, or let's say you liaison with the medical laser safety officer. But if there's, let's say, a new piece of equipment that's going to be brought into your IR area or your radiology area, you need to make sure that everyone knows about that equipment, the safety concerns, the eyewear, what sort of safety controls need to be in place. Just like Vangie said, we hear over and over again, this new rental piece of equipment comes in, no one knows anything about it. We don't even know if the doctor's credentialed. We have no idea what sort of accessories and what sort of equipment needs to be there, and especially eyewear. So this is really important. Any sort of equipment purchases, new fibers, whatever. And every time you get a new laser system, you need to conduct that laser hazard evaluation that we're going to be going through step by step how you do that in our course in September. Also, you have the oversight of any sort of protective equipment. Okay, Vangie talked about eyewear. And once again, you need that user guide. You need to know what is the wavelength of your laser and what is the optical density or the filter material that's in it. And that should be found in your user guide. If you don't have a user guide, you got to call out to some sort of optical laser manufacturer or a laser educational company that can help work out that calculation for you. You got to make sure that you have the right optical density for, let's say, the excimer laser that you're working with in the IR area, if you have that. Because I've been called in on a consult and audit, and they had the misconception, well, the doctors are wearing lead glasses because they have the C-arm, but they also have an excimer laser that could actually cause cataracts if you had an inadvertent exposure. But I'm sure the lead glasses protect you. And in an extensive investigation, we found out that no, they need to be wearing the laser glasses with the right filter. And so these are sort of things that you need to have oversight for. Make sure they're labeled. You can't just scratch them on. You got to make sure that they are stored properly. You have the right cases, that they are taken care of, and also cleaned. I can't tell you how many times I say, how do you clean your glasses, your laser glasses in between use? They'll say, well, we take one of those germicidal cloths and we just wipe it all down. Germicidal cloths can actually cause damage to the filter material that's in the lens of your laser protective eyewear. You need to research. You need to find out what is the manufacturer IFU, okay? What is that, all right? How do you take care and clean them in between case, in between patients? So as Vangie talked about, you know, this is a required position, and OSHA does have a mandate. The CFR 1910 that says that you need to provide, the employer needs to provide the right eyewear to the employees with a specific laser wavelength and the optical density, all right? You need to make sure that you comply with this, you know, OSHA, but also all the other organizations that are out that provide standard of care for your institution. And we can't stress enough, whether it's rented or owned or leased, okay? Any device coming into your facility or is within your facility, this does apply. Now, we are all wearing multiple hats. And I've seen people attending my courses, radiation safety officers. I've seen risk managers. I've seen scrub techs. I've seen OR nurses. I've seen any sort of manager, staff, perioperative educator. I've seen, you know, across the board, people, biomedical engineers that have come in and have attended these courses, and they are the medical laser safety officer, and that's okay. You know, you can delegate, and that's the cool thing about it. You don't have to do it all yourself, because we all know all the constraints that we are now working under in a healthcare facility. And even smaller areas, let's say you work, this ANSI document applies to veterinary clinics, dental offices, aesthetic clinics, any sort of outpatient clinics. You know, you can collaborate in your area of expertise with other people within your hospital service, okay? To really make sure that you are working under the appropriate compliance standards. And you can even work with an outside consultants to make sure that you are compliant and have the standards of practice for the best safety outcomes that you can achieve in your facility. And as Vangie said, once again, we don't care what sort of accreditation organization that you're dealing with. All of them, and we'll go through this more in our class, have regulations, elements of performance, standards, guidelines, conformance criteria that you have to comply with 100%. And I was, besides being a consultant, I've also been an OR manager of an ASC, and we've had AAAHC come in and Quad A, we've had CMS. I'll tell you, every single organization, and of course I know about Joint Commission, that they have a section that applies to lasers, okay? And so as far as criteria that you need to meet and comply with. And even the Joint Commission, they just released a 2025 survey criteria for managers and MLSOs to look in each department and making sure that you're in compliance. So just a summary, you know, what we're going to be talking about in September. It's a 2-day class. We go over everything. And this is the most comprehensive class I know Vangie and I have worked on in our entire history. And we're taking thousands of slides and melding and creating really to bring you the best practices going forward. And so that we can really enhance your role, whether you're the MLSO or a deputy, or you report to the MLSO. We're going to talk about how to conduct a laser hazard assessment. We're going to talk about real life scenarios that you will meet all the time, okay? How do I deal with this problem if the doctor doesn't want to wear glasses? How do I deal with, you know, equipment malfunction? We're going to give you contact hours. We're going to show you examples of audits and committee charter documents and laser checklists and timeout documentation samples, medical surveillance forms, and a sample facility policies. And this is kind of how we are. We're adding to this as we go, but you know, we're going to start bright and early, whether on the East Coast, West Coast, 6 o'clock in the morning. Here we go. I'm in California, but we're going to be there for you. And we're going to go over fundamentals and compliance terminology, because the world of lasers is global and it is an alphabet soup. So you really need to know all of these. We're going to talk about what are the utilizations. Where, you know, I don't care. You may just have a holmium laser or an excimer laser in your area right now, or dealing with the IR clinic, or but your eyes are going to be open to all the different lasers, because your job may expand, you may move, you may acquire new lasers. So we are going to make this a very global class. And then we're going to go into depth, you know, documentation, instant reporting, handling of devices and fibers. And then once again, all the compliance standards that you're going to be incorporated in your policies and procedures, and how to create a laser safety program, your audits, medical surveillance, how to set up a hazard analysis. And then the next day, we're going to be going into ocular hazards, all the different aspects of that. And then we're going to review delivery systems, and there's a lot of delivery systems. and then plume and smoke and how to handle this occupational hazard. Anesthesia practices. This is so important if you have a shared airway type of procedures going on within your facility. We have some vendors that are going to contribute. And then these ethical dilemmas and case studies. So this is the site to register. There are an early bird fees. But the other exciting thing about this, we have a QR code in a minute, is that we are in the area right now of presenting you a course, like Vangie said, that is BLS approved. And we're going to show this video, why it's important to have certification.
Congratulations on completing your laser safety officer training. You're one step closer to becoming a BLS, CLSO, or a CMLSO. Certification as an LSO shows your expertise, boosts your credibility, and can advance your career. It's recognized by employers and safety professionals worldwide. To be eligible, you need an approved LSO training course, like this one, 1 year of experience performing the responsibilities of an LSO, a degree or equivalent professional background, and 2 professional references. Applying takes just a few minutes online. Visit lasersafety.org, submit your application fee, then email your application, training certificate, and references to bls@lasersafety.org. We typically follow up within a few days. Becoming a BLS CLSO or CMLSO is simpler than you think, and it's worth it. Visit lasersafety.org to apply and take the next step in your laser safety career today.
So with that, certification is always an optional next step for anyone who has that expertise in training. And, it's important whether you're a CMLSO or a CLSO to really take that next step after a year because it shows that you have that expertise, that you have ownership, that you really are qualified in your area. Some hospitals require it, some hospitals don't, but this course would meet that criteria if you decide to do it. This is the OR code, QR code, that if you would like to sign up for our class, you can take a quick screenshot of that. I'll come back to that in a minute. Once again, we are BLS approved, and you would receive points for that. And we are also sponsored by OR today. So with that, I'm just going to go back and to our host.
Thank you so much, ladies. We've got a couple of questions that have come in. The first question is, as a young clinical engineer, I served as the co-LMSO with a nursing counterpart. Do you see organizations using this model? Does it have advantages over having only a technical or a clinical MLSO?
I'll take that because I was actually a contracted medical laser safety officer for a large hospital system out of Atlanta. And that was their model. And it actually worked extremely well. They were both MLSOs. I mean, depends on what your organizational structure is going to be. I mean, the issue is you can do somebody that is a medical laser safety officer, but the other one is a deputy, but they have both imperative roles that relate to the success of the program. I mean, yes, the nurse or the surgical tech has the clinical background, but they don't have the engineering methodology of why a laser does what it does in so many sense of the word. I think it's a great model, but it really depends on how your hospital would like to set it up.
I totally agree. They can complement each other. As you know, we have been in numerous facilities, both Vangie and I. We've seen a lot of organizational structures, and I think it's important to understand that lasers just aren't in the OR anymore. Where we first started years ago, we've seen them branch out into a variety of different clinics and areas within a facility, even areas on a campus, or obviously we've seen hospitals with multiple facilities. So I think this is something that we will talk about going forward in our course, but presenting different models and how you can work with each other. But I think this is a great way that you can bring the best standards of compliance in, to all the areas that are using lasers.
On the subject of lasers, another question here is, how do you quantify the degree of laser exposure to person?
There's really several ways. The standards, I'd say, Patty, what was it, about 8 years ago, just changed to where baseline eye examinations were not required. And what the confusion was that if an exposure occurred, it was hard to differentiate it cumulatively if they never reported it to begin with, whether it's an exposure from some other type of radiation or lasers. Usually, if you're exposed to a flash or not having glasses on, or you think you are, it means immediately setting up an examination by an ophthalmologist to assure that retinal damage hasn't occurred. You can tell an old burn from a new one. Patty?
Yeah, and I know radiation, you're thinking about badges and monitoring and I get that. But it's a different type of energy source, it's different wavelengths. We're dealing with light energy, we're dealing with non-ionizing energy sources. So unless you're in that small area of excimer, and but we don't wear badges, and as Vangie said, if there was ever a suspected injury, that is where this medical surveillance course, type of program would come into place. And that's when you're going to be following your policy and procedures, and you're going to be then, going forward and with your medical surveillance documentation.
Great. Now, another question here is, I hear the two titles of LSO and MLSO used interchangeably within the medical field. So what is the correct name?
I think they're used interchangeably. There's no right or wrong. I think medical laser safety officer differentiates to medical applications. But again, LSOs, having that title is perfectly okay and usually and customarily used in industry, but we have used it very interchangeably in medical service areas.
Yeah, and I think, as Vangie said, the industrial model tends to be just LSOs. And lasers are used a lot of other areas besides just medical. And I think that's where the M came before. It kind of applies to the .3, which is really, lasers used in healthcare. But even within that document, you're going to see medical laser safety officers and laser safety officers used interchangeably. So I think it's just within your hospital system what your designation is going to be.
Okay, so who is the best person in an organization to take on the role of LSO when lasers are used in multiple facilities?
That one's a hard one. It depends on how big the hospital system is. The only reason I was chosen because I already had a background, but up at Dartmouth, you have a industrial hygienist that has embraced learning the clinical end, and yet is still the LSO for that hospital system. So can I say is one better than the other? I would have to recommend, if you're a biomedical engineer, radiation technologist, that you're going to have an uphill learning, and it's going to be challenging because medical aspects of procedures are changing rapidly, but it's not something you can't embrace and do because you are the administrative role as that, and you can always rely on a deputy that has a clinical role to help guide you from those clinical perspectives. So.
Yeah, and once again, it's all up to your facility. And I think Vangie and I have seen everyone come through our courses. And it's, let's say you're a radiation safety officer, you have no idea what the surgical or the aesthetic or dermatology or the ophthalmology, ENT, you have no idea of that, but you still have to perform a laser hazard evaluation. Then, as she said, get someone who has that clinical background. You take ownership, you start going into the sites and seeing where these lasers are being used. Work with the laser operator, work with the laser user, work with the laser manufacturer, read the user guide, which is really informative, and that will help bring you up to speed also. So it's a little bit more of an uphill challenge, but a couple of lead hospitals that I have been working with, they were radiation safety officers, and over a period of a year, they were able to bring that program up to, you know, a very, very viable and competent level. So.
Perfect. Another question here is, where do I find a listing of what states require a laser safety officer? And is there a tracking system online?
Patti and I will both jointly answer that. Every state in the United States, because it is regulated, as Patti said, requires a laser safety officer. How are they going to know? Well, you know, let's practice this tongue in cheek, by liability instead of good judgment. How do they know you're speeding in a car when you get pulled over? So I think that comes with inspection and discovery if you don't have one. So I think the importance of this webinar to all three areas of expertise that are medical laser safety officers is for them to understand this is regulated and it's just good medicine. It's good practice. Patti?
Totally. And, you know, I think that, I mean, when I go into a state and do an audit or teach a class, I go, this is just kind of where I'm from. I mean, there are resources that I know are available through private organizations, but I can also Google. I hate to say that, or use whatever platform you want. And I just start, you know, laser requirements within this state, you know, looking at radiation safety, look at lasers, and I will find a lot of times what is required. We will talk about specific states in our course. There's about 8 states right now that really do mandate extensive registration, extensive oversight, and not only you have to get online and register as an MLSO. You have to show your certificate you went to a class.
Yeah.
You have to, you know, register your doctors, register your staff. But you know, every state requires a laser safety program and a medical laser safety officer. So if you want to find specifics, that's a good way. But you know, it's a universal regulatory requirement of the U.S. Whether your hospital choose to ignore it or not, that's up to your risk management team, you know. But
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, ladies, for your time today and for such an informative presentation. Please remember to visit medicallasersafety.com for more details and registration for the virtual training course on September the 27th and 28th. Now, any questions regarding the training, please reach out to events@mdpublishing.com. Just a reminder that today's webinar is not eligible for a CE credit. Please visit icewebinars.live for more details of all our upcoming ICE webinars and, of course, complimentary registration. Now, if you've missed any of our past ICE webinars, please visit icewebinars.live to view our whole webinar archive. So thank you all for your time today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
thank you.
Thank you.